Greetings. The presentation that follows here is a conversation between myself, Mark Gura, and my co-author, Michelle Haken. We are the authors of the book Creative SEL, Hands-on Projects to Boost Social-Emotional Learning. This presentation will focus on one of the many student activities detailed in the book. Those 32 projects were submitted by more than a dozen different individuals, including myself and Michelle, who created this one titled Mindful Game Creation. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel. It'll result in more teachers seeing these videos. Michelle, we've been working together for over a decade.
Yes.
We've done a bunch of projects together, including this book, Creative SEL. So you're a teacher. My sense is that really is the core of who you are. Tell us where you teach and what you teach, and if you dare, how long you've been teaching, and good stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. 24 years, predominantly 8th grade English. I started in New York City and then I moved up into the suburbs and taught in Connecticut. And for the past 20 years, been middle school in Westchester, New York. And about 19 years ago, I also started adjuncting at a college. I always call my classroom with my 8th graders my learning lab. I get to try out and experiment and practice my pedagogy that I read about, that I get excited about, and then share it with professionals in graduate schools who are working on their master's in teaching and getting certified as educators. Also publishing with you, Mark, and I credit all my books to you. I consider you not only just a friend, but my mentor in so many ways. We get together and we talk about everything.
I didn't think that's what was going to come out, but thank you very much. I'm much appreciated. It occurs to me that your situation, some people could see that as a typical, mandated middle school ELA class. And I know it's not typical. I also know it's not typical because you made it something special. What you contributed to this book in large part was hatched in your classroom. Certainly the perspective that shaped that. But at any rate, it's been out for a while. And having put together a book, this book is published by ISTE, International Society for Technology and Education, which has a wonderful book publishing division. We worked long and hard on this with the editing team there, but you work hard on a book and then it comes out. You make connections through that and discoveries, but you also get more perspective. So what are you feeling now that it's been out for a while?
I don't know if my perspective has changed so much. When we were working on the book and writing and hashing out our ideas, one of the central ideas for me was that social emotional learning is not an add-on curriculum. It's something that we're already teaching and incorporating in our classrooms. And for me, with English, it's through poetry, it's through the literature that we read, and then all the other creative activities that I might bring in and add to elevate my students' understanding of reading and writing. What's changed is how SEL has just broadened for me across so many other content areas and creative ways to utilize it to support our students as whole human beings.
Well said. And you're reminding me, the book, in addition to giving activities, because it's very much a guidebook for teachers, suggesting to them and giving them details on activities they can do with their kids. But as I'm listening to you, I'm remembering how much we put in up front about what SEL is
Yeah.
and how it plays out in the lives of students. And so I'll just add one little thought. Since we committed to doing this book on this theme, SEL, it's become something that I've grown bigger and more sensitive antenna for.
Yeah.
I'm constantly on the lookout for SEL stuff as I go through all of these news items that are aggregated and dumped in my inbox. And I come across a fair amount, but what troubles me is so much of it I see is teaching kids about SEL. And we took a very different approach.
Yeah.
The title of the book is Creative SEL, and the subtitle is Using Hands-on Projects to Boost Social Emotional Learning. And now that I see this fork in the road, I'm so happy that we took the approach of offering our colleagues hands-on projects. Creative learning experiences are engaging, meaningful, and lead to lasting learning. That really was a good way to present this to the field.
The activities that we include in the book run the gamut from building relationships to building metacognitive awareness and even intrapersonal skills. But SEL is so much, and we try to look at all the different ways to help students develop these life skills that they need, not only to get through school, but to function as active citizens and participants in our society outside of school as well.
And now I'm thinking back. Yeah, we included a framework
Mhm.
that very elegantly digests and organizes this huge, broad area that is SEL and all of its constituent elements. And we very carefully provided activities and materials to address all of it. And we're proud about that. I guess I'll mention here that the book has, as I recall, 32 activities, right?
Yes.
And we wrote about half of those. And for the other half, we reached out and contacted colleagues who graciously contributed activities and ideas. In the show notes for this, I'll provide a link. ISTE Publishing provides a free PDF that has the table of contents. So anyone who's interested can look and see what these 32 activities are and the 5 areas they break down to. But I thought, since I have Michelle in the house, let's talk about one that she created, which is Activity 24, Mindful Game Creation. So before you tell us a little bit about that, I want to say that you and I have been collaborating for over a decade, and throughout that time,
Yeah.
you've expressed interest in games, game-based learning.
Yes.
And in the beginning, I was wondering, what is an ELA teacher doing with this high interest in games and game-based learning? What is it that you feel this approach offers that's special?
Well, first, I'm going to say, as an English teacher, that games are story-based and driven by a story, and they have the different elements of story writing and literature. It's just a different genre. There are so many different avenues that you can explore when it comes to games and gamification. I gamified my classroom maybe about, I want to say, like 8 years ago. After being introduced to the idea, and I utilized my students as resources to really help me build out the game over time. In this particular section in the book, in this activity 24, it's having students be the story writers and the game creators The content of the game would be mindfulness. The students are in the creative mode and they get to design their own games. Could be based on a video game, it could be based on a board game or a card game, for them to think about how to help promote mindfulness among their audiences. I love the idea of putting students in the driver's seat as content creators. And that's something that I do in a lot of my classrooms, give my students permission to be the creator, to be the designers. But these are skills that students can use in so many different ways. And this activity really asks students to think about their favorite games and design a game independently or groups that is going to support mindfulness, and they can go any route. They can actually build the games, they can pitch the games in a Shark Tank style. There's a lot of different things that they can do, and it's so fascinating to see who chooses the board game element, who chooses a role-playing game versus somebody who creates a whole card game.
So the students actually produce a product.
Yes.
They produce a finished game, not just a concept for a game, but they actually produce a physical game
Yes.
kit.
And build a prototype and have it tested out with others. Depending on your time that you have or you want to use this, if you want to build this in as like a mini unit, as a summative assessment, it can be just like writing, creating that pitch for their game, describing the game, like creating a logo or a name for the game, writing out the directions. Or if you have more time, the students, they're actually prototyping that game for people to try out.
So now when your students produce these games, one of the overarching goals is for them to illustrate, educate, enlighten others about mindfulness, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so how do they come to know what mindfulness is?
Well, that's part of like a mini lesson. That's something that they explore. We define, we talk about what it is, what it's not. You as the teacher are to help them facilitate through their game design. They're looking at different definitions of mindfulness and thinking about, what works for them and other strategies to be more mindful. And then how do you spin that and turn that into a game? So there might be some reading different articles about mindfulness or watching a TED talk or, different videos. You as a teacher can provide them in a jigsaw, those different mentor texts. And you could also allow students to explore and bring their own articles and videos and resources to the table about mindfulness. Another way to go about it is through like a genius hour, a passion projects, which are something that I did in my classroom for many years, where, students were exploring this topic and this idea and created something about it.
Sounds like the middle school I wish I had gone to. So, I think maybe there are some people who are listening to this, and it's because what you're describing sounds very rich. How do your students experience this? Is this something they like or love to do? I'm putting my tongue in my cheek now. Do they find this boring? So how does it go?
Nowadays, and there's so much research about schools that are like providing meditation and they're doing yoga in physical education classes. My students, they are very overscheduled, so like that moment to have this time in the school day, in the school week, to follow a project that is, and mindfulness or yoga is something that they want to explore. I mean, these are things they choose, not me. I'm not dictating what their interests are and how they want to approach this mindful game creation or any game creation for that matter. In this case, it's very specific to social emotional learning. It's even like they could be as simple as like talking cards to like dice games. There's so many different avenues you can go.
Yeah, again, it sounds so rich because there's design involved and art involved and, collaboration and interaction with other kids. Here, try my game, and
Yeah, and
vice
get the
versa.
feedback.
Very rich. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, oh, well, this is a particular expression of student voice and choice. You were making it clear that you're not assigning specifically what they do. They're coming up with ideas and choosing things that move them.
100%. Our students are so curious and they come into school with incredible curiosity. And then when we get into secondary education, so much of what they study is dictated to them. So to provide and carve out a little space for more choice is just going to elevate your students' voice and agency in your classroom, which is what we want to do.
Listening to you, I'm thinking some people are probably wondering, how does she get to do this? She's an ELA teacher, but I'm willing to bet that you make the connection to the required curriculum obvious to whoever the supervisor might be or the parents. So that doesn't really become an issue, I guess.
Once in a while, a few years ago, I sat down with my colleagues and we sort of looked at our English curriculum and what are the units of study that we are teaching. And we decided that it would be best if we fit our units of study throughout the school year within the commitment of our school system. And those commitments are all social emotional tenets, caring, social responsibility, community, creativity, critical thinking. So all of my units of study, each one is diving into that commitment that is the mission of our school. English teaching, I'm going to say, is very flexible and it's constantly evolving. I'm not just teaching my students how to write essays, based on the ISTE standards. I want them to be creative communicators. So they might be doing digital storytelling. They might be creating games or writing narratives or doing research on climate change and creating infographics. This is what education is about.
What I'm hearing is a 24-year veteran, still or maybe more passionate now than ever before. That's a wonderful way for a teacher to be. Your enthusiasm comes across loud and clear.
But I know for me, Mark, we live in a world where there's so much information coming at us. And it's fascinating. Like you said, like in my mailbox every day, I'm getting all these different articles, and whether from the moment I wake up till the evening, and getting curated resources and listening to my colleagues who have podcasts and vlogs and checking out what they're talking about, who they're talking to. My 30-minute commute back and forth to work, I'm listening to audiobooks. During lunchtime, I might be talking with my colleagues about a movie or a streaming network. There's so much information thrown at us, but as adults, I don't think we're passive consumers of information. And I don't want my students to be passive consumers of information. I want them to read books that are going to be exciting and interesting and provide articles to support their thinking and talk about what's happening in the world and what's happened in the past and how does this inform us moving forward. I want them to listen to podcasts and share with me all the great stuff that they're reading. If you're not enthusiastic, then you're making it really hard for your students. And if you don't love what you do, why are your students gonna love learning in your classroom? And I always say that to my graduate students, like, why do you want to be a teacher? What are your passions, and how do we communicate that to our students so they get excited about the content that they're learning?
I'm getting the impression that what you do for a living, Michelle, is very satisfying and exciting. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel. I'd appreciate it. You'll find links and info below about the Creative SEL book and the others mentioned in this conversation. Creative SEL, using hands-on projects to foster social emotional learning, was published by ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education.